Not only is he the source, but he is also the supplier. He is the sufficient source, but he also has sufficient supply. A sufficient supply of this grace. Let me read you an illustration. This one guy, he notes, how many gallons of water are in the ocean? Answer, 3.6 times 10 to the 20th gallons of water in the ocean. That is a 1 with 21 zeros behind it. How many stars are in the known universe? 70 sextillion. Didn't know that was a word. That is 7 followed by 22 zeros. It was calculated by a team of stargazers based on an Australian Australian National University. How many grains of sand are in the world? Answer, 7 quintillion 500 quadrillion. I didn't even know these numbers existed. He goes on to say that even if these answers are incorrect, here is my point. God's grace is bigger than all these numbers. You could empty the ocean and the beaches of water and sand and pluck every star from the sky, and God's grace has only begun. That's not the finishing point. That's the beginning point of God's grace. It is so sufficient. He is the God of all grace. That's why He's able to save us, secure us, sanctify us. That's why it's so sufficient. Because He's the God of all grace. If I was ever to ask something from anyone, I would want to ask the God of the universe for grace. Because it's vast. It's unlimited. I started out talking 4 weeks ago about the national debt. And I mentioned to you how the national debt is similar to what we owe that we cannot pay. The number is so staggering, we can't even begin to accumulate. And I mentioned to you that a census was taken that all of the money in the United States only equaled $1.2 trillion. So even if you had every dollar bill, every coin in the entire United States, you wouldn't even come close to paying the national debt. Now that's scary, right? But the God of all grace saves us. He saves us, He secures us, He sanctifies us because He is able to do it. It's sufficient grace. And I think many Christians fail to realize the vast supply of God's grace. I also mentioned to you that we have this mixed paradigm, this paradigm that we're saved by grace, we live by our works, and we're glorified by grace. Somewhere in the middle, we decided that for a non-Christian, grace is enough, and then for a Christian, now it's all about your works. And I thank God that that's just not true, that His grace truly is sufficient, that He is the source and the supplier of all grace because He's the God of all grace, the God who created the heaven and the earth, and He's the sustainer of it all. And if God paid, listen to this, if God paid the national debt, if He paid the national debt, if He paid $20 trillion to pay off what we owe, why wouldn't He pay a whole lot less? If He has enough grace to buy our salvation, to purchase us, to redeem us, why wouldn't He give us grace randomly? Here's a great passage for you. Romans 8:32. Listen to this. He that spared not His own Son. So God the Father, who spared not His own Son Christ, listen to this, but delivered Him up for us all. He literally, the God of the universe, delivered His Son. How shall He not with Him also freely give us all things? If the God of the universe saves us, if the God of the universe secures us in that salvation and sanctifies us to help us to grow to become more like Him, why wouldn't He give us enough grace for our daily lives? And there are a lot of Christians that just don't comprehend this, that can't get their head around this, that, I'm just not sure God has enough grace in His storehouse for me. But we've missed it. Because this isn't the God of the universe paying $20 trillion out of a $20 trillion checking account. He has an unlimited supply of funds to pay the debt that you owe. And if he offered his son, why wouldn't he give us more? Let's say, for instance, to illustrate this, I had $1 quintillion. Okay? And I decided to buy my children a house in Malibu. You know what? Let's just buy Malibu. Let's buy the planet. That's a lot of money. Yea, verily? Say I decide I want to buy the planet. And on that planet, I want to provide for my son a house in Malibu. So here he is. He's in Malibu. And say he comes to me one day and he says, Dad, and he says, I racked up a water bill. I look at my son and I say, Son? He says, yeah, the water bill got kind of out of hand. The water company came and they diagnosed the situation, and basically there's a little flapper on the back of the toilet that wasn't making a seal, and it ran. And I said, well, son, how much is it? And he says, well, it's $1 quintillion. And I said, son, that's an expensive water bill. Where do you live? And he says, Dad, you bought me a house in Malibu. And I said, well, we're moving from Malibu. But let's say, for instance, I was the creator of the heaven and the earth. The creator and the sustainer of everything. It's mine. I own it. I built it. Let's say, for instance, I'm God. And I have enough grace to save everyone in this room and everyone in this world right now, in the future, and everybody in the past. That my grace was so big. And one of my children come to me and they say, Dad, God of the universe, I'm really struggling with some things in my life. I'm having a tough time dealing with an issue in my life, in my marriage, in my family, my job, whatever it might be. It would be unfair in my estimation. It would be unjust for a God of the universe who has all power everywhere, has every right to give you grace, sufficient grace, would hold back and say, I'm not going to give you any grace now. You racked up that water bill, son. And you know what? You knew the toilet flapper was bad. And they're only $3 at Home Depot. Go check it out. You get the red ones, the corky. How do I know this? Because years ago, I had a really expensive water bill. And that's what they attribute it to, was that little flapper thing. So when someone says, my toilet's running, I say immediately, stop it! Stop the toilet from running! Shut it off! Now, would it be fair for me to say, you know what, I'm not gonna help you in your hour of need? The God of all grace, the God of all grace, the God who spared not his own son, but delivered him up. Why wouldn't he give us freely all things? John Blanchard said this, so he, God, supplies perfectly measured grace to meet the needs of the godly. For daily needs, there is daily grace. For sudden needs, sudden grace. For overwhelming needs, overwhelming grace. But the grace of God is given wonderfully, but not wastefully, freely, but not foolishly, bountifully, but not blindly. God's grace is able to help us through every situation we have in life.